Below MSRP? Below MSRP. Below MSRP. It's pretty simple. Two Rivers Ford sells all new non-specialty Fords below MSRP.
Couple of numbers that really encapsulate just how hard-earned that win was for Tennessee. I don't know if that's the right word, but maybe it is, because how many times during that game did you think, Jackson, welcome back. It's the Buck Rising Show. No Buck Rising today or tomorrow. I'm Lucas Panzica, Jackson Williams on the other side of the glass. During Tennessee's win over Texas, how many times did you think to yourself, oh, we've seen this movie before?
Flashbacks of 2022, round of 32, Michigan. Anybody?
Yes. Yes, that second-round loss, Kennedy Chandler's team against Michigan in the second round 2 years ago, right after winning the SEC tournament. The amount of scoring droughts that both of these teams, but in particular Texas, underwent. Texas had better shooting numbers over the course of the night, but they were held certainly for longer periods without a point, as Tennessee had what I think, considering the stakes, is the best defensive performance in Rick Barnes' history at Tennessee.
You could not let them score because you simply couldn't buy a bucket on the other end.
So often in March, Tennessee's defensive identity kept them in games. right? When the offense was cold or when they just didn't have answers on offense. And those games would lead to heartbreak. We mentioned the Michigan game. The three-pointers go completely dry. Michigan. FAU last year in the Sweet 16. Loyola Chicago a few years ago in the second round as Loyola went on to their Cinderella run and got to the Final Four. But I saw this stat pop up from Sean Coleman. Sean Coleman on Twitter. Tennessee is the first team ever to win an NCAA tournament game while shooting less than 15% from three and less than 35% overall from the field. In tournament history, teams that shot that poorly previously were 0-66. That number is now 1-66 because Tennessee wins despite shooting 22 of 65 from the floor, 33.8%, and 3 of 25 from three, 12%.
The most impressive part was they didn't trail in the second half.
Yeah. It's great. And I will say this about the difference, because I don't think this was just two teams playing bad basketball where one had to win. Tennessee was getting looks constantly. They just were not falling. I mean, you talk about a lid on the basket, whether it was layups, whether it was three-pointers, pinballing out on multiple occasions. Jonas Adu going in for a dunk and the ball ricochets off the back iron and soars into the stands. It just felt like one of those nights where Tennessee was just destined not to find the bottom of the net. Yet it didn't feel like Texas was going through the same story. They did miss some open looks, certainly, but especially in the first half, Texas couldn't get anything. They couldn't get any looks. So it is a credit to Tennessee defensively. And by the way, Santiago Vescovi is now the all-time career steals leader in Tennessee basketball history with his 3 steals in that game. But I will say, for all the criticism that Rick Barnes gets in March, I'll say this. Tennessee won this game because of Rick Barnes. For all the times that Tennessee's defensive standard, that the program, the foundation of the program essentially is built on, kept them in games that led to heartbreak. This was the first time in the Rick Barnes era that defense is what kept them in the game and won them the game. So now the hope is the cold streak is in the rear view, or that's 2 of the last 3 games where Tennessee struggles to shoot. Mississippi State in the SEC tournament and Texas on Saturday. But big free throws late by Jonas Adu and Dalton Connect. And that was a bit of a struggling point, certainly for Connect. I don't know how many times we saw Tennessee reporters tweeting out pictures of him at Thompson Bowling Arena at 10:30 at night after a game, whatever it was, where maybe he scored 30, but he went, 7 of 12 from the free throw line. So credit Dalton Connect and Jonas Adu for stepping up with big free throws late and survive in advance. That's what it's about. But I'm willing to say Creighton is too good for Tennessee to have a shooting night like that and still survive. It'll be interesting. Late tip off that one on Friday night. We mentioned the news out of owners' meetings in Florida that it's unanimous from the competition committee. The hip drop tackle has officially been banned from the game. Tom Pelissero on Twitter tweeted out the video that the NFL showed in a press conference of what those banned swivel hip drop tackles look like. And I'm watching this 55-second video of what appears to be perfectly normal football plays, and I'm just thinking, oh, this is going to be a talking point for long stretches of the coming season.
How do you call this consistently?
It is making officials' jobs very difficult, and we're already in the place where games, high-level situations, in a lot of cases are being decided by a defensive tackle falling on top of a quarterback in the process, right? A hand hitting the helmet of a quarterback, all which are against the rules now and should be called. But obviously a lot of those instances are, well, what do you want the guy to do? I'm seeing a lot of that in this video that I'm watching in terms of defensive players and thinking, what do you want him to do? When you're wrapping someone up, wrapping them up around the waist, trying to take them to the ground, I just don't know how coaches are going to go about coaching this. And I'd be fascinated to talk to any Titans assistant. Coach Mack obviously will be on the show on Friday. We haven't had Coach Mack in quite some time. NCAA tournament is taking Coach Mack away from us. SEC tournament as well. So it will have been 3 weeks since our last appearance with Coach Mack come Friday. And fascinated to ask him about that. How coaches are supposed to evolve with the rules, not just evolve with the game and how football is being played in terms of strategy and personnel, but with the changing rules of the game and how that impacts things like personnel and certain coaching points with veteran players that have been doing this for 15 years versus guys coming into the league now that have been in the league for 2 to 3 years. How do you tell a guy like Jeffrey Simmons that's been in the league since 2019, or we'll say Harold Landry, right, that's going to be chasing down players, chasing down quarterbacks, how you tell a guy like Harold Landry that's been in the league now for about 6 years that he has to completely change the way that he tackles? I get player safety, but, and to be honest, I was fine with this. I didn't have a big issue with the hip drop thing until I see that from Tom Pelissero on what is considered a hip drop tackle, and too many of those examples in that video just look like football plays to me. And I can already see Titans fans, NFL fans tearing their hair out throughout the course of the 2024 season. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. When we come back, Rhett Bryan will join us in studio. We will do a draft hour with Rhett, not just talking about prospects, but we'll talk about the L'Jarius Sneed acquisition, looking back at L'Jarius Sneed as a pro prospect in 2020, and how that could affect the Titans draft strategy coming up in 1 month from today. Rhett Bryan of Titans Radio sits down with us next in studio on 104.5 The Zone.
It is 11:01. Good morning from the 104.5 The Zone Studios. I'm Jackson Williams. According to Ian Rappaport, out of the NFL's owners' meetings in Orlando, the competition committee has banned the hip drop tackle in a unanimous vote today in Orlando. In Titans news, the Titans add another big piece, acquiring cornerback L'Jarius Sneed for a 2025 third-round pick and a swap of 2024 seventh-round picks. The contract aspect, which is what held the trade up initially, was also agreed to, signing a 4-year, $76 million contract with $55 million guaranteed. To March Madness, the Vols getting a 62-58 win over Texas in the round of 32. They will take on Creighton in the Sweet 16 on Friday at 9:10. You can catch that game right here on The Zone. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, you need to visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
One month to the day, we will hear Roger Goodell step up to the podium with the number 1 overall pick in the 2024 NFL Draft from Detroit. The Chicago Bears select Caleb Williams in a little over a month. But Rhett Bryan is in studio with us, executive producer of Titans Radio. Good morning, Rhett.
Good morning. How we doing, Lucas?
Doing great. Love this time of year when we are in the full throes of the NCAA tournament and the dust kind of settles from that first and second wave of free agency, but now you got coaches and owners all in the same place to talk about it.
Yep. And between what has come out of the owners' meetings today and then a splash trade and signing for arguably the best guy in the free agent pool before he was tagged in Kansas City cornerback L'Jarius Sneed. Wow. And then to your point, we're a month away from the NFL draft taking place in Detroit. I'm actually working feverishly in the laboratory getting things ready for Titans radio coverage. And, man, this is, it's my favorite time of the year. I enjoy this almost as much or more than the regular season when the games are played because this is how it's all built.
Is that your Christmas morning of the sports calendar? We were talking about it last week. Like, what is the most Christmas morning feeling you get on the morning of a certain sporting event? For me, it's always the first day of March Madness in terms of annual sporting events.
Oh, it's fantastic. Sure.
And, for a lot of people, it's the start of college football season or the NFL. Is it day one of the draft for you? Just that?
It'd be a tie between day one of the draft and maybe week one of the NFL regular season. But yeah, day one of the draft is way up there for me.
So you not only have homework, obviously, on every draft prospect upcoming at the draft in Detroit, but also on L'Jarius Sneed from 4 years ago in the COVID draft. Before we get to Sneed and how that might impact Titans draft approach, give me your real-time reaction. You just watched the Tom Pelissero video from owners' meetings, the examples of the swivel hip drop tackle that are now going to be flags in the NFL. I just talked about it in the last segment, and I watched you watch it during the break. What are your thoughts?
Honestly, I don't know how defensive coaches and in particular defensive players are going to have to execute these things. I don't know how they're going to do their job. I really don't. You already can't do much of anything above the nameplate on the back of the jersey because that's considered a horse collar. It's tough. It's tough. I mean, clearly there have been lots of injuries tacked on in the last couple of 3 years. I mean, Tony Pollard, one of the newest Titans, it ended his season a couple of years ago. We saw what it has done to former quarterback Ryan Tannehill, and the list goes on. But it's a physical game, and it's a tackling style of game. It's almost like finding the strike zone as a major league batter. There's got to be a sweet spot somewhere, but I don't know what the answer is to this. I don't know how. Honestly, defensive coaches like Coach Mack, I bet he is sitting here going, boy, I sure am glad I'm not doing this for a living anymore.
They did show the Tannehill tackle that got him injured in London against the Ravens. That was part of that package. A lot of the clips they showed led to injuries. But, yeah, it's going to be a tough line to walk. One last thing from owners' meetings. Tom Pelissero just tweeted that NFL Competition Committee Chairman Rich McKay told him the replay assistant will now be permitted to correct certain types of incorrect calls for roughing the passer and intentional grounding.
I think those are huge and hugely helpful because as we're going back to what is the tackling window that you can hit the quarterback, there are some ticky-tack calls, and I think that's huge in trying to correct the game. And, if I'm an official, yes, there's a sense of pride of, okay, you've changed my call, but there's also a sense of, you might be able to help grade me better so that I can, officiate a playoff game or a Super Bowl, and also just to improve the quality of the sport. I'm okay with them taking another minute to go, you know what, that wasn't egregious. No, we're waving that off. I think the other interesting thing that's come out of these meetings, too, is that teams get a third challenge regardless of whether they won one or both of the first two, because it used to be for the longest time, the only way you got a third is if you won the first two. So I think that's big, potentially game-changing there.
Pelissero does note on the replay assistant being allowed to correct certain types of roughing the passer or grounding calls. It must be purely objective. So quarterback has to be out of the pocket, right? Or if the quarterback was hitting the head, then those type of plays will not be reviewed. But
if it's egregious, they won't. Yeah,
right.
They won't touch it.
Yeah,
if it's ticky tack or questionable, they'll give it a look.
Yeah,
and hopefully they can turn that around pretty quickly and keep the game going. Because I know that they're trying to make sure that games isn't going extremely long in time. For television ratings and the like. But I think that's interesting. These two or three things. I mean, it seems like every offseason there's something pretty major that alters the game. All three of these things certainly will, and I would say the hip drop tackle is the leader in the clubhouse in that.
Rhett Bryan of Titans Radio is our guest on 104.5 The Zone. Okay, let's talk about L'Jarius Sneed. The Titans acquire the former 2020 fourth-round draft pick out of Louisiana Tech by the Chiefs for a future third-round pick in 2025, a swap of 2024 seventh-round picks. The deal they give Sneed, who was tagged by the Chiefs going into the free agency period, the Titans give him 4 years, $76 million, $55 million guaranteed. Your initial reaction, Rhett Bryan, when you saw the compensation and the financials on L'Jarius Sneed, who is now a Tennessee Titan?
Well, first of all, the average salary per year is under that $22 million mark. I think that's impressive. The other part is that you swapped sevens and you gave him a third in 2025. And I don't know if they tested the market and that it wasn't as robust. I think the biggest part of this, as it always is the money. It frees up, $21 million off their books. And you had to figure that when they extended Chris Jones, they can't keep all of them together. And first of all, I was just of the thought that it was not going to happen just because of the Calvin Ridley deal. And I knew they had some money left or whatever, but apparently it heated up pretty quickly. I think it was always a conversation, but it heated up quickly, and here we go. He may be one of the steals of the virtual draft that year. Because you go back and look at him, first of all, I went back and looked at the big board that Coach Mack and I put together in that year's draft. We had him slotted exactly where he was taken. And so for everybody listening, we set the board vertically and then we go horizontally. And by what we mean by that, we take the list of each position, best talent, best looking film, etc. And then we draw a line after a certain point, and that is a pod or a tier of players. We had him in the bottom of tier 4, meaning he could be taken as early as late third round, but probably fourth round and maybe even fifth round, because you're right there at a line that goes in the fifth pod. We had him right at the bottom of the fourth pod. He was selected the 32nd player in the fourth round, 138 overall out of Louisiana Tech. And he was considered a little bit of more of a developmental prospect because he came from a mid-major program. He had played a lot of safety in college, so there was some argument as to whether, okay, he's going to be a corner maybe. And, Kansas City's used him inside and outside, so he can do the things you want him to do. but the athleticism is clearly there. I mean, went back and looked at his combine stuff. 6'1.5", 192, almost a 76-inch wingspan for a cornerback. He's a long prospect, 4.37 in the 40. His 10-yard split, the first 10 of that, 1.51 seconds. 41-inch vertical leap, 10-foot 9-inch broad jump. Four pick sixes in high school, 3 more in college. I mean, listen, you can arguably say before he was tagged, he was the pick of the litter in this free agent crop. He and Chris Jones were it. Like, and look, I know they have Patrick Mahomes. I know they have a host of other great players, including Chris Jones. But I don't think they have back-to-back world championships without his effort, especially that goal line play he made against Baltimore to get them back to the Super Bowl was amazing.
The punch out on the Zay Flowers fumble at the goal line. Yeah.
Yes. And it just goes to show you, it's just weird how things work out. There were 15 cornerbacks drafted ahead of him in that draft. So Jeffrey Okudah goes 3rd overall to the Detroit Lions. C.J. Henderson goes 9th overall to Jacksonville. He's now on his 3rd or 4th team. A.J. Terrell, 16th overall by the Falcons, and he has been a very nice player for them. Damon Arnett, I believe he was at Ohio State at number 19. He's not even in the league anymore. I think he's in jail. Noah Igbenogany, the track star from Auburn, 30th overall to the Dolphins, and he is now on his 2nd team. Jeff Gladney, tragic at 31. He's no longer with us. He, I think, died in a car wreck. Jalen Johnson in round 2, pick 50. There's a guy that has done very well in his time in Chicago. Trayvon Diggs was the very next pick by the Cowboys. Christian Fulton at 61 by the Titans. Michael Ojidamiya at 77, Cam Dantzler at 89, Darnay Holmes at 110, Troy Pride at 113, Reggie Robinson at 123, and then the pick right before L'Jarius Sneed, Josiah Scott. So there's a couple of picks in there that have turned out to be very nice, but L'Jarius Sneed has, and listen, what he's overcome to get to this point. There's a fantastic article that the Kansas City Star put out about 3 years ago about him breaking the cycle of his family's history. In their small town in Louisiana, they're known as being in jail and making poor decisions and things. His father was in prison for 17 years. His mother was in jail for a long time. He was raised by his older brother and his grandmother. His older brother was shot and killed 3 years ago. I mean, it's terrible. But his mom got a hold of him because he had a couple of small brushes with the law when he was in Louisiana Tech, and it was a wrong place, wrong time thing. He's the one that has broken the cycle. He is the one that has gotten his family out because they had a reputation. It's a fantastic story, and I can't imagine how hungry he is coming here now that he has gotten the bag and ready to put it together. And listen, when you're talking about him and Chidi Awuzie and Roger McCreary, on paper, that might be the best trio of cornerbacks the Titans have had since they started this thing as the Titans. I mean, it's impressive on paper.
Yeah, that's been brought up. I've heard that being said, that could this be the best cornerback room? And I feel like we had a similar discussion with Adoree Jackson, Logan Ryan, and Malcolm Butler. Mm-hmm. But, yes, now depth is the next step in that room, mm-hmm. right? But the versatility of those three, and Denard Wilson spoke to that in his introductory press conference as well. You feel just so much better about the cornerback room. Now, I'd argue you feel, in terms of how you felt about a certain position pre-free agency to this point in the offseason, cornerback has made the most strides in that regard, right?
Yeah, absolutely. With those 2 pickups that you have. And listen, there is some depth at the corner position in this draft as it relates to – there's a lot of nickel cornerbacks in this draft. And listen, one of the Justin Mello of Broadway Sports and the Draft Network, he has reported, he's always a good one to follow about the top 30 visits that are being reported. Jarvis Brownlee from Louisville, remember that name now. He's somebody you could get in a little later on. He's somebody depth-wise that you might want to pick up there that could help you. But yeah. I feel so much better about that room than I did just a few weeks ago, just like everybody else.
So let's talk about how the acquisition of L'Jarius Sneed, of course, pending a physical, could impact the Titans' draft approach with Rhett Bryan of Titans Radio in studio with us on 104.5 The Zone.
Something else that Bert suffers from, erectile dysfunction. If you need it, the Tennessee Men's Clinic is here to help you. Guys like Bert struggle with this all the time. Insecurities are okay to have, but the Tennessee Men's Clinic is the best support system in place to make sure that you can get right. They have been treating guys like Bert for over a decade, and they are here to help you with non-surgical solutions. The Tennessee Men's Clinic has multiple providers here in downtown Nashville, close to where we are, and in Cool Springs to make sure that you can get the proper treatment path that you deserve. Their urologist-based practice with multiple providers has been focused on outcomes and treatments with the highest success rates, as high as 90%. A lot of guys go in after pills and herbals have failed with no surgery. Like I said, they're there to help you. The multiple providers and urologists are there to take care of you. It's time to feel amazing and hit your goals this year. They're there to help you with scheduling. It's usually easy to book same or next day appointments. So get treatment for ED knocked off the list early this year. They specialize in seeing guys who think they're out of luck, want to regain hope that they can be successful in the bedroom and beyond. Call 615-208-9090. That's 615-208-9090, or go online to TennesseeMen'sClinic.com and book an appointment today.
In 2023, Chiefs cornerback L'Jarius Sneed was matched up with Calvin Ridley, DJ Moore, Garrett Wilson, Justin Jefferson, Jerry Jeudy, A.J. Brown, Jamar Chase, Stephon Diggs twice, Tyreek Hill twice. I don't know a cornerback that has a stronger resume from the 2023 season alone, Rhett Bryan, as far as what he was tasked with.
Murderer's row. And I think only one of those, and I can't remember which one it was, had 5 catches on 7 targets, but he did not. I don't think he didn't allow a touchdown in 2023, right?
Yes, and you would be talking about Tyreek Hill, and who had the best season out of all those players. Rhett Bryan of Titans Radio in studio with us. I'm Lucas Panzica. Buck off today and tomorrow with you until 1 o'clock on 104.5 The Zone.
Slacker. Titans,
I know. It picks this time of year to go to California. I think he's just going to live in California now. I feel like California suits Buck well.
I believe you're correct.
L'Jarius Sneed, obviously acquired by the Tennessee Titans. It was a late Friday night news dump for a 2025 third-rounder and a 2024 seventh-round swap. So, Tyreek Hill in 2 matchups, Rhett, against L'Jarius Sneed. In the regular season, 8 catches, 62 yards. In the postseason, 5 catches, 62 yards. Tyreek Hill had less yardage than 62 in only 2 other games in the 2023 season. One of those was against the Titans, but obviously he was hurt for the majority of that game.
Right.
So L'Jarius Sneed did a better job against Tyreek Hill than anybody he was matched up with. And I keep coming back to the images from that icy playoff game in Kansas City where, he's just beating him up at the line of scrimmage. He's taking him to ground as soon as the ball is snapped. And, all the criticism about the Dolphins not being built for cold weather and all of those things. L'Jarius Sneed won that matchup. I know you look at the 5 catches, 62 yards, but L'Jarius Sneed dominated that matchup that night, as did the Chiefs' defense as a whole against the Dolphins' offense that had set records in the regular season.
And I'm telling you, that's one of the reasons why I believe that Kansas City are back-to-back world champions. Like, he's made plays in these last couple of seasons, and in particular in the playoffs. Unbelievable. And again, I would still argue he may have been the free agent acquisition of this 2024 free agent class. It's a toss-up for a lot of people between him and his teammate Chris Jones, and you could probably throw a couple others in there, but this guy, golly, he's just a dang ball player, man. He just... I love the fact that he's going to be in a Titans uniform. I think it's going to be awesome. And to hear those people in Kansas City, they're like, oh, no. It's like, what did you think was going to happen? Listen, folks, the salary cap is real. And, yes, you have a franchise quarterback. As long as they have Patty Mahomes and some things around him, they're going to compete every year. But you cannot keep everyone together. And, look, it's one of the reasons why I think the strategy has been what it is in free agency, because Will Levis, barring something unforeseen, is going to be the guy at least in 2024, and he's under a rookie deal. Mason Rudolph, between that and him as the backup, you haven't committed a lot of money to that position as it relates to the pie chart and what you're spending positionally for this salary cap that went up an unprecedented $30 million. And if I know Rand Carthon and Chad Brinker and Anthony Robinson, who are all way smarter than I am, guarantee you they front-loaded a lot of this stuff where if Will Levis is the guy and it's time to pay him, it all works out book-wise.
Yeah, and it didn't feel like the Chiefs were ever going to pay L'Jarius Sneed, right? This felt, you franchise tag him going into free agency. A trade is constantly being talked about. Titans and Colts ended up sort of being the front runners for it, it would seem. But I do think Chiefs fans were turning their nose up at the compensation. Like, you couldn't get... Buck and I were talking about, and this was us just speculating, what could this look like? But I remember saying, you don't want to give up a 2024 second, do you? You want to go the entirety of day 2 without a draft pick with all the needs this team has? Yeah. And Buck and I had the conversation of, theoretically posing it to Titans fans, would you be open to a second-round pick swap, where instead of picking 7th, 38th overall, you're picking more on the back end of the second round? Those are the conversations we were having about potential compensation. Had you told us 2 weeks ago, a 2025 third and a 7th round swap, no-brainer.
No question, no-brainer. And again, I think with what he brings to the table, so the first thing, I know you guys will have Coach Mack on again this week like you do every week. But the thing I'm reminded of is when he was brought in after Arizona let him go and Jeff Fisher brought him in as an assistant, that 2005 salary cap purge where everybody left. And it was, because it was just wasn't fiscally able to do that financially. And so they brought in the Kevin Mawais on the offensive line and the David Thorntons and the Chris Hopes, these stabilizing forces and factors to go with a lot of young guys. And it took a couple of years, but they got back to it, went 13-3, third year in or whatever. And this is kind of what is happening. It's a reset positionally of a lot of things. And so, I really like the moves that Rand and that team have put together. Tony Pollard is perfect to go with Tajay Spears. I love getting Lloyd Cushenberry on the offensive line. He was the best center prospect, free agent guy in this whole thing. What they're doing is setting up what could happen on that Thursday night and Friday night a month from now.
Well, they've done a good job to set up quality starters at multiple critical spots, but in most parts of the roster, depth, obviously still a ton to be addressed, right,
Sure.
over the course of the next few weeks. So that brings us to the NFL draft. Was the primary reason why you were going to come in here in the first place, and we spent half an hour talking about L'Jarius Sneed, but that's okay.
That didn't happen until Friday night about 10 o'clock.
Late Friday night, that's
there
right.
You go.
You brought it up at the end of the last segment. The Titans did have a top 30, or at least slated to host, I don't know if they have yet, a top 30 visit with Louisville corner Jarvis Brownlee Jr.
Yep.
But with this acquisition, pending a physical, obviously, L'Jarius Sneed, there are questions there about the knee. He was on the injury report, in and out of practice all last year, but we'll see what all would come of that. With this acquisition, what does it most change to you about the draft approach? Where does the cornerback need now fall for you with this team in the draft?
Somewhere, honestly, for me, somewhere in day 3. I really believe that. And knowing that you don't have a third, so we're obviously talking about a 4, 5, 6, or 7. But here's the other part. So to me, personally, my opinion, this sets up, first of all, it's going to be crazy what I think might happen that Thursday night in the top of the first round with the Titans being at 7. And I think it just depends on what the philosophy is between Coach Callahan and Rand Carthon and all these guys, because it's setting up right now for you to get the best left tackle in this draft if you want Joe Alt. You should be able to get him at 7 because – and the tipping point is it's always quarterback stuff, and you already got 3 going in the top 7. And I think J.J. McCarthy may be the other one in this. There's a reason why the Minnesota Vikings picked up another one from Houston to have some stuff to be armed to go up and go make something happen. If that's the case, then it sets up perfectly for you to get Joe Alt at 7 or the best available at that point, which if you wanted could be Brock Bowers. If you wanted could be one of the top-tier wide receivers at that point, not named Marvin Harrison, probably Rome Odunze. Maybe it's Malik Neighbor. I don't know. Depends on who else is in that trade conversation. But I believe that it sets you up to get your cornerstone left tackle piece, and I would prefer Joe Alt over Ola Fashanu for only one reason. Alt is the most polished tackle in this draft class. Plug him in next to Peter Skoronski and let them go. And then the other thing I think it sets up at pick 38 in round 2 is you can go get best available there if you'd like. There are plenty of receiver options right there. You could go get cornerback if you'd so desired. If you wanted to go a top inside off-ball linebacker there, you could do that. If you wanted to go D-tackle, you could do that. You could set yourself up for the best available player at 38 if you don't do that at 7. And so I think that's the interesting thing about the strategy here is, to your point, they've put together some nice veteran pieces in a lot of the right places so that they can strategize to exactly what they want to do draft-wise, which if you're talking about, say, a tackle and a receiver at 7 and 38 or a tackle and a – anyway, they've set themselves up in the places where positionally this draft is rich. Tackle is one of them. Cornerback is pretty deep too when you're talking about nickel corners and those kinds of things as you get on into the third day of the stuff, and maybe even late day too. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens. I mean, does J.J. McCarthy, by some stretch of the imagination, ends up getting drafted in the top 3 quarterbacks, and then that turns everything on its ear? Where does Marvin Harrison Jr. end up going to? I mean, it could be bonkers. And I think, depending on who's playing poker in this thing, we know that the Falcons got Kirk Cousins, so that kind of takes them out of the quarterback market. But between the quarterback market in 2025 not being as strong and knowing that you may have to still leapfrog them at 8 to get something done, because now you're hearing whispers about Denver moving up. That 10, 11, 12 spot in the draft, where Denver and the Minnesota Vikings, those are all quarterback needy teams. So
yeah, it's a fascinating area of the draft.
Yeah.
I do think Titans fans have been for quite some time, and with the acquisition of Ridley and now Sneed as well, are especially solidified in the left tackle at 7 camp. That's by far the majority opinion that we've heard, at least on the show, from Titans fans about what to do at 7. There's kind of this great irony about it, Rhett, too, in that the Titans have had such good left tackles over the years. Wide receiver has been a spot that they've struggled to kind of get right on a consistent basis in terms of the draft. So there's kind of an irony to me about, instead of swinging for a Malik Neighbors, that Titans fans are so feverishly about taking a left tackle at 7. But I think it speaks to the need that this team has there. My biggest argument, or biggest problem with the argument against left tackle at 7, which is a vocal minority, is I have yet to hear a good solution for that position beyond taking one at 7. Like, I can think of solutions at receiver at 38 of guys that could fall today. There's so many. I mean, the depth.
Absolutely.
And I know people say the tackle class is deep. It is, but not like the receiver class, right? Like, there is a depth there at wide receiver that we haven't seen in years.
And it is whatever variety you want. If you want slot, if you want outside, if you want, I mean, to your point, there's going to be, there could be, first of all, I think there could be as many as 7 or 8 tackles taken in the first round, and wide receivers may be more like 7, 8, 9 wide receivers in this thing. Somebody that could be there technically at 38. How about Ladd McConkey from Georgia? Wouldn't hate that, would you? A.D. Mitchell, who's a local prospect who went to the University of Texas. I don't think he gets that far down, but I mean, it ain't out of the realm of possibility. Depends on who likes what. But there are receivers littered throughout this draft. It is one of those things where the world of 7-on-7 football in youth, it's a pipeline of this stuff every year. Now, is there a Malik Neighbors and a Marvin Harrison Jr. every year? I mean, maybe not, but you've got top tier and good stuff all the way through.
Gibo on the F&M Bank chat, where you can chime in on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch, mentions Ricky Pearsall, the Florida player. That's the point, right? Is you get past A.D. Mitchell, who was in the playoff last year, and you get past Ladd McConkey, the 2-time national champion, and you can just keep going. You can keep going to Pearsall and Jermaine Burton and Xavier Legette. The list goes on and on. So my question is, Rhett Bryan of Titans Radio in studio with us, I don't know necessarily how the board is going to fall in regards to those players that we've ran off at receiver, but the class is deep enough to feel like you got a quality solution at 38, however it shakes out, or even on day 3. But can you really say the same about left tackle?
No. Let me say this. I think you would find the consensus is that the top 2 tackles in this draft are Joe Alt and Olu Fashanu. And then after that, it is the Tali Fuagas of the world. People will even mention a Troy Fautanu, who I think he's probably more suited to be a guard because the lack of height there. Certainly there's a little drop down there with the next level of tackles in this, whether it's Blake Fisher from Notre Dame or Tali Fuaga, as I mentioned, Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma. Amarius Mims is right there in that conversation just because I think he's more of the unicorn with the upside. Like the physical gifts are ridiculous. And J.C. Latham is another one who has dramatically improved his draft stock throughout these last few weeks and months. But yeah, as I say, Alt is the more polished of the two. He's plug and play. Fashanu is the more athletic of those two guys. And I think maybe has a little more upside, but maybe not as developed right off the bat. Like he brings good skills to the table and you can probably plug him in, but he may have some moments.
So last season, Rhett Bryan, your draft crush was very publicized, and it started, I believe, at Senior Bowl. It was Tulane running back Tyjae Spears, who ended up a third-round pick of the Tennessee Titans, flashed in his rookie year, and now moves forward as part of a running back duo alongside Tony Pollard in his sophomore season. So when we come back, we'll hear about Rhett Bryan's 2024 draft crush. Maybe he'll be playing for the Titans in a few months. I'm Lucas Panzica, and this is 104.5 The Zone.
QC Kinetics is here to keep you moving, to get you moving as the weather starts to warm up. I know it's a little chilly today, but as spring gets further underway and summer on the horizon, they want to make sure that you have the opportunity to get that nagging joint pain out of your life. They're the nation's leader in regenerative medicine. I'm talking lasting joint pain relief with no surgery, no drugs, and no downtime. QC Kinetics is literally transforming lives. Their advanced treatments harness your body's ability to restore and repair damaged joint tissue. Pro athletes have been doing this for decades, but now this life-changing treatment is available for you. So you can walk, run, climb stairs, play golf, and move again pain-free with no pain pills, no risky surgery. It's an all-natural solution. QC Kinetics has tens of thousands of satisfied patients who have reclaimed their mobility. So take action now and live your best life this spring and summer. Call QC Kinetics for a free consultation at 615-249-4024. That's 615-249-4024.
Titans may have addressed one need at cornerback with the acquisition of L'Jarius Sneed. He joins a room with Chidobe Awuzie, Roger McCreary. Some versatility in that room, certainly something to build off of. But there are needs aplenty across the defensive side of the ball. Welcome back. I'm Lucas Panzica, in for Buck today and tomorrow. Rhett Bryan of Titans Radio in studio with us. And your draft crush lies within the defensive side, Rhett, as opposed to last year when it was now Titans running back Tyjae Spears.
But where the crush began was the same place at the Senior Bowl. And this is Florida State defensive lineman Braden Fisk. That dude made such an impression on me. He was, first of all, outstanding young man, very humble, knows he's not maybe the biggest or fastest or strongest or whatever. And then, of course, he went balled out at the combine. So he's 6'4", 292, arms 31, hands 9 3/8. Ran a 4.78 40 at 292 pounds. Its first 10 split was 1.68, 33.5-inch vertical for a guy 292.
Goodness.
26 reps at 225. If you saw any of the lightning in a bottle season that the Florida State Seminoles had going 13-0, you saw this guy flash a lot, especially because there was attention on his teammate Jared Verse, who will be a first-round draft pick in the pass rush category. Braden Fisk, disruptor, just irritator, whatever you want to say. In fact, you go back and look at his performance in the ACC championship game against Louisville. I think he had 9 tackles and had 4.5 for loss, 3 to 3.5 quarterback sacks, and he's all over the place making stuff happen. And this is a guy that you could get at 38. It might be a little early at 38, but he's somebody on day 2 that could help you if you wanted to get him. I don't know where he goes, but I sure do. I sure would like to see him as a Titan because I think he would fit in good with what they've got going on with Jeffrey Simmons. But he's just somebody that stands out to me. And his teammate, Marshawn Nealand, because he transferred from Western Michigan. And Marshawn Nealand is also a guy that is an edge rusher who I think is going to make some waves in this draft, who had a nice combine and it has had a nice progression through this process, pre-draft process. But Braden Fisk is somebody I really, really like.
So he did have 3 sacks in that ACC championship against Louisville. 3 of his 6 sacks from the 2023 season came in that game. So that's not a guy that you see being on the board because the depth on the interior, both offensive and defensive line, it doesn't feel like it's a big talking point this year. Would you say that it's on kind of the weaker side as opposed to some of these spots we have been talking about, like wide receiver and left tackle?
Yeah, I think so. I do, because when you're talking interior defensive linemen, 2 of the names you'll hear immediately, one is Byron Murphy from Texas. The other is his teammate from Texas, Devondre Sweat. I think Murphy's a first-rounder. I think Sweat is a second-rounder in night 2. And there's a handful of other guys, but certainly Braden Fisk is in that mix. But no, there are positions that are weaker in this draft. I wouldn't necessarily call it weak. It's just there's a drop-off there. Like, for example, in this draft, there's nobody in the running back group that is in a top tier. There won't be a first-rounder taken that's a running back. Same thing with safety. I don't believe there will be a safety that will be taken. Actually, not safety, I'm sorry. Inside linebacker. I don't think there'll be one taken in the first round. There's not a top tier in that. And then, for example, you look at the tight end position. It's Brock Bowers, and then it drops off.
And everybody else.
Pretty rapidly. I mean, you can talk Jatavian Sanders with the Texas Longhorns, who did not have a great combine. There's some value a little on down there, but, I mean, Brock Bowers, whoever gets him is going to be really happy because he is a mismatch nightmare. He is a chess piece you can move around. I mean, he's going to be a star in the making. He just is. We've seen it. We've seen him do it on the big stage. We've seen him do it in the big conference. And he's just different. He's just different. He's probably a top 5 player in this draft, Brock Bowers is.
He's definitely in that Is he in that best available discussion for 7? Like, can you hear an argument for taking Brock Bowers with the 7th overall pick versus Joe Alt and solidify the left side of your offensive line, hopefully, for the next few years?
You better have an answer at 38, or you better have – because, there may be – maybe it is that.
But that's the problem you keep coming back to, right? And not taking a tackle at 7. Like, okay, then what's the solution?
Right.
There's just, it's really hard to find that
what
plan
you're gonna
B.
What you're going to get at 38 if you decided to go tackle there is you're going to talk about going to the bottom of that second tier of tackles, like Kingsley Suamatia from BYU or Karan Amegaji from Yale, who is a super athletic, super big guy that he played in the Ivy League, You're not going to get the Amarius Mims and the J.C. Lathams and those guys that's in that top pod that'll go on Thursday night. Listen, I can see that, but all I keep thinking about is Will Levis was sacked 28 times in his 9 appearances. 28 times. One of which he didn't finish because he's been sacked so many. You have to protect that investment. You're getting him the weapons around him for him to succeed, but you need that pocket presence, that pocket, so that he can survive to make those things happen with the quick flip of the wrist that he can do to get it to his weapons. You got to do that
At both tackle spots, right? I mean.
Yeah, because we don't know what the deal is with NPF.
Yeah, he's on the roster, but Chris Hubbard is not. That's a free agent who finished the year injured. So still question marks bookending the offensive line. So let's say Titans go left tackle as we probably expect it. You're going to see these mock drafts continue to trickle out. The majority of them are going to have the Titans taking Joe Alt or Fashanu at left with that 7th pick. Would you be terribly shocked to see the Titans go defense at 38? Given the depth of the wide receiver class in this draft and the needs on the defensive line and potentially at edge rusher, how surprised would you see to see the Titans go defense?
I wouldn't. I would not. Just because of what you can get in that neighborhood, whether it is like I'll give you an example of somebody that could be there at 38 that could really help you as an off-ball linebacker. Edgerrin Cooper from Texas A&M. He may be the top linebacker in this draft.
Over Junior Colson.
Either one of those guys would be but Junior Colson is also someone that you could probably get at 38. And that's just in that particular position group. The only thing I could see that might be different if they went offense at 38 is if they decided to go guard. So, to go opposite Peter. Because, listen, I know they have, his name escapes me now.
Sadiq Charles brought in the former Washington guard, and Daniel Brunskill's still under contract, as is Dylan Radins.
So, I don't know if that is a thing, but yeah, I could certainly see defense. And safety would be a spot because now you need one of those. Kevin Byard is still not on this team. He's in Chicago.
Yeah, and still
got Amani Hooker.
Some free agent safeties out there as well. Marcus May, who I know visited this team. Justin Simmons is still on the market.
That's right.
There are still some names, and we'll probably take a look at that at some point tomorrow in terms of who is still available in free agency. But, Rhett, we were in here for an hour. I feel like we barely scratched the surface on a lot of draft stuff.
Why don't we do it again tomorrow?
We'll run it back. Tomorrow at 11 a.m., we'll get deeper into the discussion about the quarterback draft that has some fascinating talking points to it and maybe a little bit deeper on the defensive side as well. Rhett Bryan of Titans Radio, appreciate the time, man.
Glad to do it. Went by like it was 5 minutes. Let's do it again tomorrow.
Yes, indeed. When we come back, we'll hear from Titans head coach Brian Callahan down at NFL owners meetings in Florida on 104.5 The Zone.
It is 12 o'clock. Good afternoon from the 104.5 The Zone Studios. I'm Jackson Williams. The NFL owners' meetings in Orlando going on right now, and it has come out the competition committee has unanimously voted to ban the hip drop tackle. More news coming from the NFL owners' meetings across the week. The Vols beat Texas in the round of 32, 62-58. The Vols will take on Creighton this Friday night at 9:10 p.m. You can catch that game right here on The Zone. And a huge trade for the Titans over the weekend, acquiring cornerback L'Jarius Sneed for a 2025 third-round pick and a swap of 2024 seventh-round picks. The contract aspect, which is what held the trade up initially, was also agreed to, signing a 4-year, $76 million contract with $55 million guaranteed pending a physical. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, you need to visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Welcome back. Kicking off the noon hour with NFL owners meetings in full swing down in Florida. Titans head coach Brian Callahan asked about the trade for L'Jarius Sneed, asked about Tony Pollard as part of that running back duo with Tyjae Spears, as well as the strength and conditioning staff that the Titans finalized just last week with a beefed-up strength and conditioning staff under Zach Woodfin. So some interesting stuff from the Titans head coach. The news out of NFL owners' meetings, of course, the hip drop tackle has unanimously been banned from football for the 2024 season. We were talking about it with Rhett Bryan in studio. Tom Pelissero showed the video that was played at the press conference of examples of the swivel hip drop tackle they're trying to take out of the game. Surely nothing will go wrong on this. I'm sure it will cause no headaches, no frustration for the 2024 season as critical third down and fourth down stops and late game scenarios are called back because of penalties. It'll be interesting. We'll see what happens. So let's hear from Titans head coach Brian Callahan, asked about the addition of Tony Pollard to the running back room to accompany Tyjae Spears, and this is what the head coach had to say.
Yeah, added, I think, some explosiveness to our offense. Obviously, you pair up Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears together. That's a pretty formidable 1-2 punch. Two guys that both can score touchdowns. Got some explosiveness and make you miss in their game and catch the ball to the backfield and can protect. And so you have two guys that are really sort of interchangeable, both with a little bit different skill sets that I think really add something unique to the offense. We'll find out. I think as I see them right now, they're both pretty interchangeable. But I do think that there will be some definition of role as we get going, as you get the pads on and start playing. Those guys will probably separate themselves in some role or another that they'll really kind of sink their teeth into. But as of right now, I see them pretty interchangeable. So I don't know. That's probably the best way to put it. We'll find out more as we go.
The interesting thing about Tony Pollard that I feel like has not been discussed at all, Jackson, is the impact that he could potentially make as a kick returner for the Titans, which he did early in his tenure with Dallas. He was one of the best kick returners in all of college football during his time at Memphis, tied an FBS record with 7 career kickoff returns for touchdowns. I mean, over 2,600 kickoff return yards, second in Memphis school history. He took a step back in that regard once he sort of became the primary back as opposed to Ezekiel Elliott in Dallas. He has not returned a kickoff for Dallas since 2021, but in the 2020 season, he ranked 4th in the NFL in kickoff return yardage with 766. He had 489 kickoff return yards and a kickoff return for a touchdown in 2021.
Now wait just a damn minute.
Okay, what is this? What's happening?
You're opening the noon hour reading Tony Pollard's kick return stats while I'm gone. This is what you're doing on the day or the Monday after the Titans trade for L'Jarius Sneed, this is what you're doing with the radio show when I can turn the thing over to you? Oh, my God.
You can't stay. You're getting multiple fines from Jackson right now because you are
Oh,
you
my
have been
God.
fined. There is a FedEx envelope waiting in your chair when you get home, bud.
you
the
are-
Instagram, we all saw it. The Titans make a trade. I have to be in an alley on Rodeo Drive. Couldn't just say
This
on
is
vacation.
how you're opening the radio show when I'm out on vacation with kick return stats.
You're
Shame on
deflecting.
all of you, really.
You're deflecting.
Everybody involved
You
should
are
be fined.
deflecting. You are so desperate for people to hear your voice, so desperately upset to be away from the limelight that you have to crash in on Zoom during a vacation. You're in sunny California right now, and you have to crash. We've been talking about L'Jarius Sneed for 2 hours anyway, but please give us, Buck, your thoughts on the L'Jarius Sneed trade that we've all been itching to hear all weekend.
Oh, no. I don't think that there should be. I don't think that there should be any fines associated with this. In fact, I think that I'm going to invoice you for my time. In fact, I'm preparing an expense report right now, given that I'm having to swoop in and save the level of discourse around here from the beach, from Santa Monica. As a matter of fact, you're welcome, by the way. That's okay. You can say thank you, Lucas. It's okay. I know you're having your day. I know you've had about an hour on Friday to yourself to enjoy. You and Robert, God knows what you did. But it's okay. I'll send you a bill for my time.
Your muffled Zoom voice is bringing down the quality production of the show very considerably.
Yeah, this show is known for its high
Yes.
quality level of production consistently. Well, you can't hear the birds in the background. You can't hear the waves crashing upon the shores here at Shutters on the Beach.
Yeah, you look like you're in front of a green screen right now. I can't believe this is what you're choosing to do with your time off.
Well, I only promised you about 10 minutes of my time today, but yeah, I think it's a big enough deal when the Titans make a trade of this consequence to talk about it. What's been the reaction, I guess, so far for people at home? Have you had many phone calls on this? How are people taking the news? Or is it like most days when we get good news where people are just happy to sit back and listen to all the different things that their good football team is doing?
The latter, fat and happy Titans fans today, because I think the biggest takeaway was about the compensation, because our discussions were all about, do you swap your second rounders? I mean, I don't think we were living in a world prior to this news where the Titans could get L'Jarius Sneed for a future third and a seventh round swap, where the reaction across the league feels like it's the Kansas City, what in the world, as opposed to Titans, what are you doing?
I mean, but isn't that just the perpetual state that Titans fans have to live in, where it's a team screwing up as opposed to another team screwing up something as opposed to the Titans doing something good? I saw Trey Wingo try and take this into they already gave Calvin Ridley too big of a contract. What are they doing signing L'Jarius Sneed to this kind of a deal on the back end of giving up assets for a team that has needs all over the place, ignoring the fact that it's a 2025 third round pick and a seventh round pick swap for one of the best young corners in the league? And even if he's not an all-pro, because he wasn't an all-pro, he wasn't selected to the team last year, and frankly, I thought that was a misstep. His numbers certainly indicated, his performance certainly indicated that he should have been. But even if he's not an all-pro caliber player here in Tennessee, the way that he was last season in Kansas City en route to winning the Super Bowl, he's been a completely competent to high-level corner for the entirety of his career. And at 27 years old, I don't know how anybody could look at this as any kind of a bad deal for the Titans, even understanding that Kansas City probably didn't get the value that most of us expected, but that's what they were holding out for this whole time. Like the idea that they were going to be able to pull off the kind of capital that I think people were talking about, potentially a day one or a day two pick, for a player that people were going to have to pay $20+ million to on the back half of things. The leverage, to me at least, Lucas, it didn't feel like it existed, and I think that was more of the holding pattern that they were in when we started talking about this stuff 3 weeks ago.
No, don't get me wrong. The blanket reaction has been that the Titans got the better end of this deal. I haven't seen the Titans getting any criticism for what they've given up for L'Jarius Sneed.
Well, Titans fans are very quick to find any any level of criticism whatsoever when they think they're being slighted, and I did see some of it sent my way.
Really? I'm
For
surprised by
people,
that. I'm surprised by. I mean, the biggest thing is the Titans feel like a team right now that's making moves like they're in a Super Bowl window, don't they? Like it feels like a team that's going for it in 2024, grabbing top of market guys like Lloyd Cushenberry and L'Jarius Sneed and Calvin Ridley. But obviously, the Titans are not set up to be a Super Bowl contender in 2024, at least not yet, with the question marks all over the place depth-wise. I guess is the goal here to make sure that you know what you have in Will Levis, to have a competent enough roster around him so you can get a good measuring stick of what your young quarterback is in his second year.
The goal is to be meaningfully competitive. All of those things can fall into that, but the goal is to be meaningfully competitive. And the way that I understand it, just touching base with some people on what was that, Friday night when the deal was done. What was that, 11 o'clock Central Time when that happened?
Yeah,
it was 9. I feel like it was a little after 9 out here in Los Angeles when that started to come across the phones. I just feel that when Amy Adams Strunk made the decision that she did about the direction that her franchise was heading, it's not just about building up towards a certain point, that there is a certain level of competitiveness that is expected here year in, year out, and that the Titans were not meeting that is something that she continues to struggle with and that she continues to want to see them do better with. So yes, to your point, whether they're a Super Bowl contender by my definition, which is more little, or your definition, which is more broad, I guess, when you talk about teams that can actually compete and win the Super Bowl. This is somebody, or this is a franchise that's owner wants to see it consistently competing for the division this way. And I don't think that Sneed is the end all be all to that, but I think that is as big a sign as any that Titans fans can take, that she wants them to do some level of competing right out of the gates, even if it's not for the ultimate championship this year.
Well, we've talked about how to measure success for the Titans in 2024 and how much of that has to do with Will Levis, et cetera. I believe you said in that neighborhood of 8 to 9 wins with progress shown from your young quarterback, that could be considered success in year one of the Brian Callahan era. But do we have to kind of reconsider those parameters now, given the moves the Titans are making? These are not moves of a team that expects to be around 500 this season.
No, but I think that's still a reasonable expectation. And by the way, you can still get a wild card at 9-8, right? That doesn't mean that has changed my level of thinking. I'm certain it hasn't shifted. I haven't looked at gambling odds or anything like that since I've been out, but I can't imagine that it's changed their odds, their futures odds for things like the division or things like winning the AFC, for example. I would imagine that they're still probably towards the bottom of the list, and that's fine. I think that meaningfully competitive can still result in 9-8 and 8-9. And if you're pushing at the end of the year for a postseason spot, that accomplishes the kind of growth that you're looking to see from a franchise that hasn't really, in the literal sense, bottomed out in the last couple of years, but is about as down bad as it's used to being over the course of this stretch. I don't think that this changes my expectations of them at all. I just think it kind of reaffirms my belief in how Amy Adams Strunk sees her franchise competing on a year in, year out basis.
Are you only here because everyone you're with is swimming and you were feeling left out, so you wanted to go back to your comfort zone?
Oh no, the pool is the pool only comes up to my chest. I've been spending more time in the hot tub than the beach water a little cold here. The ocean I'm not going to do, but the pool and the hot tub I'm all for.
All right,
bottle service right around the corner. By the way, don't worry.
Don't get in too deep. Dangerous for you.
Head on a swivel. I'll see you boys Wednesday.
See you on Wednesday. Buck Rising just couldn't stay away, could he? A lot of fines racking up for Buck chiming in from his West Coast wedding vacation. But okay, let's talk about that. Measuring expectations for 2024 and how that stacks up with the rest of the AFC South, considering what the Colts, Jags, and Texans have done or haven't done in this period of the offseason. Also, DeAndre Hopkins is down in Orlando at NFL owners' meetings. He has spoken on the hiring of Brian Callahan. You'll hear from D-Hop next, 615-737-1045. We will take your calls as well on the other side on 1045 The Zone.
I love living in the Nashville area. We have great sports, entertainment, restaurants, and we also have one of the top Ford dealers in the nation right here in our backyard, Two Rivers Ford. Two Rivers Ford is locally owned. They've been around since 1983, and they sell all their new non-specialty Fords below MSRP. So you can get the best price from the best dealer and actually have fun buying a vehicle. Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer.
Feels like we went through the entire first 2 or so weeks of the legal tampering period talking about the Houston Texans as the big winners of free agency, especially in the AFC South, but honestly across the league with the moves the Texans were making. But now, a couple weeks later, with the Calvin Ridley deal done and the Titans swooping in to get L'Jarius Sneed from Kansas City, does the conversation change at all about which team's roster has improved the most this offseason? Not which team is most ready to compete in 2024. That answer is still Houston, and it's not close between Houston, Jacksonville, Tennessee, and Indianapolis. But in terms of where the roster was when the offseason began versus now in this middle spot between those first couple waves of free agency and the draft, I feel like there's an argument there for the Titans, but we can talk about it. 615-737-1045 is the number. Jeremy in Nashville will kick us off. What's up, Jeremy? Jeremy, what you got? All right. So much for Jeremy.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, what you got, man?
I had you on mute, man. I've been sitting there for so long. I believe that the roster has definitely leveled off with Houston and definitely went past where Jacksonville and Indianapolis has. And any Titans fan that is trying to grumble about what they've done to attempt to address the needs, you can definitely see that they are aggressively trying to compete next year. You just don't know who's going to be available as far as injuries and stuff like that go. But you've got to be confident going into the season that this team is trying to compete not only for the AFC, potentially to go to the Super Bowl or into the playoffs, because you just don't know what's going to happen. But being confident with what they're building up and around the Levis and getting Cushenberry and bringing. They're trying to make this team somebody that a team that we can watch and be proud of and be optimistic that they're competing for a playoff spot at the end of the year instead of just being suffering through a season of watching 2-7 football and halfway through and stuff like that. So you got to be optimistic with the changes that they're making and they're trying to get done. So that's all I got to say.
Well, thanks for the call, Jeremy. Hope you have a cough drop for your friend there in the front seat. Look, there is still so much work to be done in terms of depth, right? Not to be the wet blanket guy, but you look at what's next to Jeffrey Simmons right now, beyond Sebastian Joseph, not Joseph Day, Sebastian Joseph, the former LA Ram, LA Charger, and San Francisco 49er. Feels like the UDFA period could be huge for this team as well and finding some of that depth. We were talking about it with Rhett. His draft crush is Braden Fisk, the FSU defensive lineman, but it's not necessarily the strongest interior D-line or interior O-line draft class. So you're going to have to find other means to accompany Jeffrey Simmons on the defensive line and maybe add an edge rusher as well. There are still a lot of holes there. Titans maybe will add a safety. Right now it's Amani Hooker and Elijah Molden essentially in that room. So I think the Texans are without a doubt, to me, the team that is by far the most in position to succeed and compete for championships in 2024. But I can hear an argument that the Titans have had a more productive offseason. I mean, let's look at what Houston has done. In hindsight, the amount of boxes that they have checked, keeping in mind what's already on the roster in Houston, a crop of talented receivers still in their rookie deal. So Nico Collins is back. I mean, Tank Dell is back, the standout rookie receiver from last year, trying to build around C.J. Stroud. They re-signed Dalton Schultz, the tight end. They bring back Noah Brown, who was a free agent. He's back on a one-year deal. So there's still a ton of continuity there for Stroud. And then they add Joe Mixon to the backfield. Obviously, there's the Brian Callahan connection there. The crown jewel of the Texans free agency haul was obviously Danielle Hunter, 2-year, $49 million deal, 16.5 sacks last year. So they get rid of Jonathan Grenard. He's off to sign with the Minnesota Vikings as a free agent, and they bring in Danielle Hunter. I remember Danielle Hunter, Jackson, being a big reason why we knew it was about to be a long year with Andre Dillard. The way that Danielle Hunter played against him in those joint practices in Minnesota.
Yeah. It was it's going to be tough facing him 2 times a year. Denico Autry over there as well. It's going to be interesting to see how the offensive line comes together. But the Titans have done a really solid job. Lloyd Cushenberry, a really solid signing there. You're going to build in the draft. I think the Titans have made flashier moves than the Texans. I mean, I think Danielle Hunter was their big splash, while the Titans now have made 2 huge moves. But I still think the Texans have added quality pieces. So I think it's about even, just with the Titans having 2 really big moves, with the Texans adding way more just quality depth.
Yeah, because they can afford to do that right now. The Texans don't need to make a big swing for a wide receiver because Tank Dell's heading into his second year as a pro. And a lot of those names that I just mentioned that have that continuity with C.J. Stroud, they could certainly address it in the draft as well, and what, as we've talked about, is a very deep wide receiver class. But depth pieces like Mario Edwards, like Tim Settle, Jeff Okudah, kind of going to be a reclamation project, I should say, at corner for Houston. They did bring back Derek Barnett, which is a guy that was sort of up there for me after those first couple waves of free agency as someone I would have liked for the Titans to look at. And I know he's a local guy. There's the Tennessee connection. But kind of the resurgence Barnett had in those last 6 or so games of the season after he went to Houston before the deadline made me think that would have been a nice piece to put in there to that Titans front that it would probably be pretty cost effective, but Texans choose to bring him back and continue to add that depth.
Yeah, him and Arden Key rotating, I think, would have been a really nice rotation of pass rushers for the Titans, with Harold Landry, if he stays healthy, being your pretty much every down outside linebacker.
The Titans, have made bigger swings than the Texans in free agency. That does not make the Titans roster. It does not mean the Titans roster is in a better state than the Texans roster, because that right now is a very hard point to argue. 615-737-1045 is the number. Michael in Clarksville is next. Hey, Michael.
Hey.
What you got?
I got a comment, one about really happy with all the off-season moves, but two, where do we stand on cap space if we finalize the deal with Kansas City? And, what'll happen after that? That's all I got.
Thanks for the call, Michael. Why don't I tell you? Now, again, the deal is not finalized, as you mentioned, in terms of it being official, still pending a physical there, but it was reported as a 4-year, $76 million deal for Sneed, $55 million in guaranteed money. The cap space on it, how that's divvied up, is yet to be determined. With that in mind, the Titans, according to SpotTrack, currently rank 5th in the NFL in 2024 cap space with just under $31 million. They are behind the Patriots, who have not spent that much this offseason, the Commanders, the Chargers, and the Eagles. Titans are just ahead of the Cardinals at 6. The Bengals are at 7. The next AFC South team down the line is Indianapolis, who is 12th with over $23 million still to work with in 2024 cap space. And you're looking at Houston down at 21 with about $13.2 million. Jacksonville down at 22 with about $11.3 million in 2024 cap space, according to SpotTrack. So it goes back to the Rand Carthon interview with Jim Wyatt down at NFL owners meetings. The Titans still have money to work with. And when you look at the best available at safety, on the offensive line, a guy that's still out there that the Titans had in for a visit in Andres Pete, 30-year-old versatile offensive lineman that's moved around several spots in his time with the New Orleans Saints. Even at receiver, some of the veteran free agent options that are still out there at wide receiver that would fit a need the Titans still have, not going out to get the number one outside receiver, right? That box has been checked with Ridley and D-Hop, but Tyler Boyd's still out there. 29 years old, obviously has the familiarity with Callahan. Hunter Renfrow is still out there at 28, and maybe that would kind of be a sign as far as what this team thinks about Kyle Phillips if that were to take place. But the point is, there are still moves out there to be made. There is still depth for the taking, and the Titans are kind of going the patient route with it, as opposed to Houston, who just did a huge wave, adding Derek Barnett kind of as a straggler there near the end.
I think you're going to see the Titans do this in waves. I think they've gotten their heavy hitters. I think the Sneed trade is the last of the huge, big swings, and then you'll see some depth added in as we get closer and closer to the draft. After the draft, you'll probably still see pieces added as we inch closer to training camp. I just think this is going to be in waves.
615-737-1045. Speaking of DeAndre Hopkins, he is down at the NFL owners meetings in Orlando. First time we've really got to hear D-Hop talk since the hiring of Brian Callahan, the firing of Mike Vrabel, and Jim Wyatt of TennesseeTitans.com caught up with the veteran wide receiver, and this is what he had to say.
Very excited to get going under Brian's offense and his schemes. Obviously, I've talked to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and those guys told me that I would love this offense. I think, sky's the limit, especially after getting a guy like Calvin. So I'm very excited for this offense. Obviously, I knew Mike in Houston. Him and I were buddies off the field. And when I went to Arizona, he was one of the first people to message me. When I was in Arizona and I might have had a bad game, he was one of the first people to text me as well. So I don't think anything will change. Very excited to
that is Titans wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins down in Orlando with Jim Wyatt. Also talked about his connection, his relationship with Rand Carthon, on just the direction this team feels like it's heading in. A happy D-Hop down in the Sunshine State. And it makes sense in year 2 of his deal. DeAndre Hopkins doesn't want to be part of this long rebuilding effort. And if there's anything the Titans have kind of signaled in this period, it's that they don't really have any interest in that. Now, that doesn't mean that the Titans are thrown in as contenders in 2024, but it does have to give DeAndre Hopkins confidence that Calvin Ridley now is going to be playing opposite him, that Will Levis will hopefully, it'd be hard not to, have a better situation in front of him on the offensive line. So DeAndre Hopkins, apart from Will Levis, maybe the happiest Titan in terms of everything that's been happening. Although you could give that to Jeffrey Simmons as well, who I know was on Twitter praising the L'Jarius Sneed acquisition late Friday night. Jeff tweeted, "This secondary, yes, loud, help me help you." Be interesting to see who Jeff plays alongside apart from Sebastian Joseph in 2024 as well. 615-737-1045. Chuck in Clarksville's next. Hey, Chuck.
Hey, Lucas. Hey, I think Rand and Bryan are done for right now. I think they want to wait till after the draft and let Bill Callahan assess where they are and what their needs are on the offensive line. And I just don't think there's any valuable out there right now they can't wait until, training camp and see what falls out after that.
Yeah, thanks for the call, Chuck. Yeah, like Jackson said, it feels like the big swings are over. Cushenberry, Ridley, Sneed. What would be left as that big swing that we've been talking about that could fall under that category of player? Like when you look at what's available, Justin Simmons is still out there at 30, and the market really is not developed for Justin Simmons like I'm sure he thought it would. So I don't know if that would still fall under that category, although when Justin Simmons was cut in a cap relief move by the Denver Broncos, it certainly felt that way. That whichever team lands Justin Simmons would be landing the best free agent safety on the board. He's still out there. As is Kyle Duggar, by the way, the former Patriots safety, Marcus May, who we've mentioned, Julian Blackmon, who's only 26, but injuries are certainly starting to pile up for him over the last 5 years or so. But there are still some moves to be made. It'll just be interesting, the timing of those moves, as the Titans kind of turn their focus to the draft, like Rand Carthon talked about with Jim Wyatt. 615-737-1045. Bam in Nashville is next. What's up, Bam?
What up, Lucas?
What you got, man?
Yo, check this out. Can you read that Jeff quote for me again?
Let me find the Jeff quote. That secondary, yes, Lord, help me help you.
It's actually, yes, Lord. It's like Lord in Ebonics. I had to do it. But, yo, I'm excited. I think everybody has a reason to be excited. You quickly see how fast this offense is turning around. I definitely think we need to make one or two more splashes on defense, and I think we can almost compete. You know what I'm saying? I know everybody's against what we got going on, but I really believe that where Callie's taking this team, they could compete against a lot of people. I mean, no one thought that that Bengals team was going to, amount to a whole lot the first year that they ended up coming down here and eventually going to the Super Bowl. So I think he has the same effect. If he can make Will Levis take a big splash this year, I think the sky's the limit for this team, man.
Thanks for the call, Bam. I agree with you, but I'm confused on one thing. Like where Bam just mentioned people that are against what the Titans have going on. Buck's talking about Titans fans criticizing what they sent for L'Jarius Sneed. Jackson, am I missing something? Where are these people? I have not seen these complaints flying out there about how the Titans are handling this offseason.
I think they're just a little deeper into Twitter than you and I are, and it's a scary place.
I've not seen the dissenting opinions on how the Titans handled the acquisition of L'Jarius Sneed. Maybe Buck can show them to me when he gets back from his little West Coast vacation. But in terms of looking at free agency as a whole, I think you can make an argument that the Sneed and Ridley deals were the biggest splash signings of the period, right? I mean, what am I missing, Jackson, that could fall under this as far as a deal done by another team? Calvin Ridley, who the Titans swoop in for, in the eyes of some, overpay, but come in, and it's not Patriots, it's not Jaguars, it's the Titans at the 11th hour, and then the move to acquire L'Jarius Sneed. Like, what apart from that has been the biggest, most high-profile move of that free agency period? And it doesn't have to be just a free agent signing. It can be a Justin Fields trade, Russell Wilson pickup by the Steelers.
Derrick Henry?
Derrick Henry. Sure. I would definitely give you Derrick Henry, especially when you're talking about a team that's just trying to make that last push to Super Bowl contention. That is quite literally fixing the thing that held them out of the Super Bowl in the AFC Championship game. The Ravens are not forgetting to use their run game if Derrick Henry's on the roster. Seemed like they forgot to run the ball against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship last year. So, yes, I give you that one. Derrick Henry to the Baltimore Ravens.
What about Russ?
Yeah, Russ to Pittsburgh. And then
Let's ride.
scared the hell out of me. And then Justin Fields traded to Pittsburgh for a conditional 6th-round pick that could turn into a 4th if he plays 51% or more of the snaps in 2024. Now, there is one of the more intriguing quarterback situations in the NFL. The Russ move is up there for sure because it kind of answers a question as far as the direction the Steelers are going to go at quarterback. For the short term, I think we all expect Russell Wilson to start the season as the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers, but can any of us with confidence say he's going to finish it? With Justin Fields breathing down his back? I don't know. That marriage between he and Arthur Smith made the Pittsburgh Steelers a very interesting team to watch in 2024. So Russell Wilson to Pittsburgh. Obviously, he's cut by Denver. He's picked up by the Broncos. Derrick Henry in a free agency signing with the Baltimore Ravens. Calvin Ridley to the Titans. L'Jarius Sneed to the Titans.
Saquon
And Kirk Cousins. There are your biggest splash deals of the 2024 offseason. And the Titans are right there in the mix with 2 of them. Really interesting what they've done in terms of top-of-market moves with certain players. But as we've talked about, so much more to be done in terms of depth in 2024. When we come back, there is some local coaching news to get to in Nashville. We'll do the polls and wrap up the show coming up next. I'm Lucas Panzica, and this is 104.5 The Zone. There is some coaching news in Music City that broke during the show today. We have not yet hit on it, but Jeff Goodman on it. Multiple reports that Vanderbilt is hiring Mark Byington to be the next head coach of the Commodores and replace Jerry Stackhouse, who was fired after Vandy went one and done in the SEC tournament. Byington, for the last 4 years, has been the head coach at James Madison University, who knocked off Wisconsin in the first round of this NCAA tournament. They were outed by Duke yesterday, but James Madison, who went 32-4 this year, won their league, got a 12-5 upset in the first round, had a nice season, 22-11 last year. Prior to that, Byington was at Georgia Southern for 6 seasons, the last 3 of which were 20-plus win years. So Vandy has their man to replace Jerry Stackhouse. Jackson, did you see John Rothstein, CBS college basketball analyst, getting attacked by Vanderbilt fans on social media over the weekend?
I did not. What happened?
Honestly, it was fair. It was fair. I'm trying to pull up the tweet. It was after Grand Canyon, who had a miserable second half against Alabama. They really hung around for the majority of that game and then were just terrible on offense for pretty much the entirety of the second half. Grand Canyon, who got an upset win in the first game against St. Mary's. Obviously, the head coach at Grand Canyon is Bryce Drew. And John Rothstein said something along the lines of, X amount of years ago, Vanderbilt fired Bryce Drew. And fast forward to 2024, he's got Grand Canyon in the second round of the tournament, and Vandy just fired their coach and had a terrible season. Vandy fans went at John Rothstein, reminding him that Bryce Drew went winless in SEC play during his time at Vanderbilt, and I think felt a little bit vindicated by Grand Canyon's late game performance against Alabama yesterday. And I love John Rothstein. I think he is one of the best in the business when it comes to college basketball, entertaining, does a great job on the sidelines with the CBS coverage. But I was good with Vandy fans. I'll give Vandy fans their flowers on that one. No, you don't get to criticize Vandy for firing the guy that went winless in SEC play, which Dennis Gates did this year with Missouri, by the way, but has a recruiting class coming in and a baseline of success from last year that is not a thing where you automatically want to let the guy go. But with Bryce Drew, it was time to go at Vanderbilt. So I'm with you on that one, Vandy fans, and you have your man in Mark Byington. James Madison played fast-paced. They play good defense. Should be an entertaining play style. The question, of course, will be about talent acquisition. What can Mark Byington do in that regard? Be interesting. Speaking of talent acquisition, continue to react all day. L'Jarius Sneed reportedly will be a Tennessee Titan, still being finalized, pending a medical, of course. But I can't wait to hear Blaine's thoughts on that. I know Blaine is a big fan of L'Jarius Sneed, has been talking about him since last season, just his physicality, that press coverage style that he plays as a corner. And by the way, L'Jarius Sneed played a lot of football in 2023. So I know that there are questions about the knee. He was essentially on the injury report throughout the course of the season, barely practiced. But it never affected his availability. And it never affected how good he was on the field. So for now, I'm not terribly concerned about the knee. And Brian Callahan talked a lot about the strength staff and what he liked about the people they brought in. Maybe we hear from him tomorrow on that. Fun show tomorrow. Adam Sparks will join us at 10:20. A little Tennessee football spring practice check-in. Rhett Bryan will be back in studio to come back to the draft talk that we quite honestly did not have time for today with all the Sneed discussion, but a lot of interesting stuff about the quarterback position, specifically as far as how that's evolved, the narratives around that over the course of the last few months. Much to discuss before Buck gets back on Wednesday, where everything just stops being fun again. So hope you'll join us for that tomorrow, 10 to 1. Jackson and myself will be back. But for now, let's do some polls.
Why so serious? Let's put a smile on that face. I don't know where the Batman is. Doesn't matter because here's Lucas Panzica on the Buck Rising Show. Update the polls, Lucas. Here we go.
They are presented by Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer. And take it away, Jackson Williams.
Rate the job Rand Carthon is doing this offseason so far for the Titans, 74% giving Rand an A, 25% give a B, 1% give a C, and nobody giving him a D grade.
What do you give Rand Carthon this offseason?
I'm going to go A so far. I think you've taken some big swings to improve your roster. I think, a lot of, especially from a fan perspective, if you looked at a lot of fan wish lists, I want to say they're almost all checked off.
What has not been checked off apart from left tackle?
I don't think this fan base ever can have enough wide receivers.
They're going to have to draft a receiver, right? I know you brought in Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins under contract another year, but Calvin Ridley's 29, D-Hop playing the final year of his deal. You got to have some sort of solution for the future at receiver as well, and right now it can't be Traylon Burks and Kyle Phillips.
My wish list would be a stud edge rusher.
There you go.
At 38. What do you think the Titans should do at 7 after what they've done in free agency? 82% going with still a left tackle, 6% still a wide receiver, and 12% going trade back.
I am with the majority here, still a left tackle. I feel like majority of Titans fans were on this prior to free agency. I felt more flexible about it prior to free agency. I was okay with hearing out the argument for a Malik Neighbors, for a best available, for a Brock Bowers. But with what you've done to address that wide receiver room with the swing of Calvin Ridley, I think I am, Jackson, fully entrenched in, please, God, take a left tackle at 7. Because, again, Rhett was in here, and he couldn't do it either. Nobody can give a good, competent solution for that area beyond just taking the best available one with the 7th pick. And until I hear a good solution beyond taking Joe Alt or Fashanu with the 7th pick, I'm going to be firmly entrenched in the camp of take a left tackle at 7.
Is a Sweet 16 better without any Cinderellas? 57% going no, 43% going yes.
I'm always conflicted on this because I love the upsets, and we got some of them, but I do think that this tournament has been perfect in that we got the Oakland over Kentucky with the 14-3. We got our share of 11 over 6, 12 over 5 with James Madison, like we talked about. Mark Byington's now the head coach at Vanderbilt. But now we get to the Sweet 16, and those quote-unquote Cinderellas from the first round upsets have been eliminated largely. And, yeah, well, it's fun to watch St. Peter's get all the way to the Elite Eight. They got dusted in the Elite Eight by, who was it? Maybe North Carolina. I can't remember who they played in that game. But it feels like we will get to avoid those matchups where the Cinderella inevitably just gets outgunned and just runs out of gas down the stretch. So love the upsets, but also love contenders going head-to-head across the board in the Sweet 16.
I'm with you. And finally, will Kentucky fire John Calipari this offseason? 60% going no, 40% going yes.
Yeah, that discussion is firing up in Lexington. The problem with firing Cal is I have no clue who you would go get. You're Kentucky. You could probably go get anybody you want, but it is a tricky proposition, and I do not envy AD Mitch Barnhart for being faced with it. It'll be an interesting offseason in Lexington. It already is in Nashville, and Blaine and Mickey will continue to talk about it coming up next from 1 to 3. We'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Appreciate you guys being here. As always, for Jackson Williams, our producer, I'm Lucas Panzica. Blaine and Mickey next on 104.5 The Zone.